Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, I feel like we're really privileged today because, the Dougy Center is one of the premier centers in the world for not only helping people in their local area, but also training different bereavement centers around the world. It's an incredible organization, and we have the head of it on today. You want to introduce her, Heidi?
Sure, Mom. And like you said, the Dougy Center is, I think, the number one grief center for children in the world, definitely. And I send so many people there that are grieving and want information about how to help their children because they have so many resources. It is a clearinghouse for everything you've ever wanted to know about how to help bereaved families and children. And today we're going to be talking just about that, helping bereaved kids and families. And we have the executive director from the Dougy Center here with us today. And her name is Brennan Wood. And she was only 12 years old when her mother died. And so she kind of grew up in the Dougy Center. Mm-hmm. She understands why it's helpful, what helped her and her family after her mom's death. And today she is the executive director of the Dougy Center, which, as you said, is the National Grief Center for Children and Families. She is the author of the book, A Kid's Book About Grief, and she is on the board of directors for the National Alliance for Children's Grief. She was the 2020 Light Fire Award Extraordinary Executive Director, and in 2022, the Women of Influence Award recipient. So welcome to the show, Brennan.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to get a chance to talk with you both.
It's so great to have you on and to have you in the position you are because, you not only walk the talk, but you've walked the walk. I know that there's so many people that are listening now that are wondering if they've had a loss and wondering about children and what will happen to them and are they going to be okay? And what a great example you are that they're going to be okay.
Right.
You can still go on and do amazing things.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get right to it. What did you need when you were 12 and your mom died? And how did you come to the Dougy Center?
Yeah. I'm happy to talk about that because I do think that there still to this day is such a misunderstanding about what kids actually need when something like this happens, right? And so for me and my family, my mom died when she was 36 years old in 1987. And she died 3 days after my 12th birthday.
Was it a long-term illness or sudden?
So she had cancer, she had breast cancer. And so for a lot of people that might feel like a longer term illness. For me, it felt very sudden because we didn't talk about it in my family at all. So I knew my mom was sick. I knew she had cancer. But unfortunately in the 80s and, with who my parents were, my mom was a bright sider. She just, as my dad said after she died, she couldn't imagine anything but a happy ending. And so she never talked to us about her impending death. I had no idea that she was going.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we never had a conversation as a family. I mean, to the extent that I literally never once talked to my mom about her being sick. So
did you notice that she was or not, or was she so optimistic you didn't really notice?
I noticed. So she was diagnosed with breast cancer and she had treatment, and then it came back. And for the whole time when she first had the treatment and until it came back, and it came back really, it was all over by the time, all over her body by the time that it came back. And so that period of time, in my mind, it was like 3 months. I don't know how long it really was. But if I look back, I think there were probably 3 months, maybe 4 or 5 months where she was really sick. Okay. And I remember thinking, please don't let my mom die, right? Like I remember kind of having
Yeah.
those thoughts, but not really ever having any conversations with adults at all about it. My older brother and sister were the ones who told me my mom had cancer. When my mom died, I was 12, as I mentioned, my sister was 15 and my brother was 17.
Wow.
And they were they were the ones that were talking to me. And so, it's hard because they didn't do it right. What I know now is they didn't do it right, but they were also, 34 and 36 when she was diagnosed. That was in the 80s. They weren't getting the support they needed, right? And so I know that they did the best they could. It also didn't happen to be enough for me in that moment, right? I needed more support. I needed more communication. What I wish I could, I would give anything to have those conversations with my mom now, to say, to talk to her about it. I'm sure she was scared. I'm sure there's so much more support she could have used as well. So in our family, we didn't have the tools to navigate her illness. And then when she died, my dad certainly didn't have the tools to navigate that at all. And what he kind of did was say, okay, so he looked at my brother who was 17 and my sister who was 15 and sat us all three of us down and said, I think we did a great job of raising you. You've had a great childhood. So I'm not going to do the whole dad thing anymore. Well, I was 12.
Oh, wow.
So I kind of had this vacuum of parental support all of a sudden, and
so it was a double loss because you lost
Mhm.
not only your mother, it sounds like you lost the emotional availability of your father.
100%. And so that really wasn't working well for me. And I remember, I can tell you, I was standing in my kitchen. I remember it. I started having a meltdown with my dad because he was spending a lot of time outside the house, staying away for nights at lots of times, just being gone. And I remember he was in the kitchen and I kind of cornered him almost. And I said, this isn't working. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I need help. And he kept saying to me, you're okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I looked at him and I remember I said, what if I'm not okay, Dad? What are you going to do about it? And he said, I heard about this place called the Dougy Center.
Wow.
I don't know what they do, but do you want to go? And I said, yes.
Wow. I have chills. Don't you,
Yeah.
Mom? I mean, that was the beginning.
Really do.
And that was the beginning. And so, I remember first walking into the Dougy Center and, doing kind of the intake process and then being placed into a group. And I would imagine I was 13 and a half, maybe by that time. And it was instantly my lifeline because not only did I get to be with other kids my age who'd had a similar experience, but I was experiencing a real void of adult support at that moment. And the Dougy Center model is based on there being a high concentration of adults to kids. So we have a master's level person who runs each group, but the majority of the adults who work with the kids are trained volunteers. And in my outside world, I was kind of screaming to be heard by my dad. And then also, the other well-intentioned adults in my life, they wanted to be there for me, but they wanted to take my pain away. So they would say things like,
And fix it.
yes, fix it. Don't, your mom wouldn't want you to be sad. You have to keep going. All those things that put pressure on a kid. And
Be strong for your dad. Did anyone say that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so I was hearing all of that. And at Dougy Center, I got to go to this place where the adults sat next to me and said, that sounds really hard. Do you want to tell me more about it?
Now, I wanted to ask you, what happened to you at school? What was school like? Did you get any support there?
It's so interesting. I was actually just thinking about this the other day because I was doing some work around some school stuff, and someone was asking me like if schools have improved in certain ways, and I'm certain that they have in a lot of ways. But I remember in 7th grade, so my mom died 2 weeks before I started 7th grade, and I didn't miss any school. I went right back to school, and I remember a few weeks into school, the school counselor bringing me into her office and saying, I heard your mom died. And I said, yes. And she said, when did she die? And I told her, and she said, how did she die? And I told her, and she didn't say anything. She didn't say, I'm sorry. She didn't say, she just said, okay, you can go.
She's the school counselor.
Yeah.
Ah,
And it was awful, right? So I knew,
Oh.
oh, I don't want to talk to these people about it, you know?
Well, she probably saw you as functioning really well. So why would she want to upset you?
Yeah. And I think, isn't that true so much with kids that aren't showing it, that we
Mhm.
assume that they're doing well, right? Instead of
Let's not have them break down. Why would we want to?
and let's not remind them that they've had a loss.
exactly
It's-
because we're not thinking about it every day, right?
Exactly. It's so
Yeah.
crazy when people say, well, I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to remind them. It's like, you don't think they're living with it 24/7?
Exactly.
Come on.
Thinking about it every moment of every day.
So,
Yeah.
so Brennan, I'm just wondering, what is the hardest thing about not having a mother
Mm.
at 12 and 13?
Oh gosh, there's so many hard things. I think, for me, um, I was still so tied to my mother at 12, right? I hadn't even gotten into my teenage years where you have that natural pullback, right? I
Yeah.
wasn't even there yet. And so for me, my mom was the center of my universe. I mean, she was also happened to be amazing and wonderful, and she made each day fun. And, she was just this great person. So there was, all the natural kind of just this person who is central to our family, central to my life is gone. Certainly for me, my dad's reaction was incredibly tough. And, he died when I was 36, and I'm very fortunate that we had a couple of, we had a lot of kind of repair time that we did together. And certainly I was one of the people that helped to care for him as he was dying. And that I felt like I got to say everything I needed to say to him. He got to say everything he needed to say to me. So now it feels a lot better. But at the time, that was so difficult. Definitely before I went to the Dougy Center, that I was the only kid I knew that had anything happen. I didn't want to be different. But at the same rate, I also was feeling so different and wanting to like scream at the world, like how is the world continuing to turn when my world has stopped? Friends didn't understand. I had a couple friends, of course, that were better at it than others, but most of my friends didn't understand. So it was, it's hard to say one thing that was so hard. It was all hard.
Mhm.
Did you have did you make any new friends? I found when my son was killed that there were some people who were good grief support that I didn't know before.
Yeah, I did through Dougy Center. And that's, I think, where Dougy Center really came for me. I definitely found new connection around that, for sure. And then over the course of my life, I definitely have friends that, I feel like I've been able to be that person for them as well. One of my best friends, I think one of the reasons we bonded is when we first met, her mother had very recently died, and she didn't know anybody who had that experience, really, I don't think. And so she found out what I did and was like, wait, why do you, like, what is this? Tell me more. And so she found out that my mom died, and it was an instant connection for us.
I was going to say, the older you get, the more that you're running into people that have had parent loss. Even
Right.
when your dad died, you were young.
Yes.
I mean, you were in your 30s. Your dad wasn't, I'm guessing, that old.
No, he died when he was 62. So he was very young when he died as well. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that was it. Yeah, it was definitely challenging. It was definitely tough. And at least I feel like with my dad, I got to do all the things I wished I could have done with my mom. I held his hand. I sat there literally sat with him for a month, holding his hand, and talking to him and all those things that, I guess in some ways, I don't know that it would ever be realistic for a 12-year-old to be able to do that. But I sure wish in, my magical thinking, I can go back in time and be the 12-year-old that could have sat with her and said, I know you're scared and it's okay,
What are
Yeah.
some of the things that we need to
Mhm.
do to help
Yeah.
family members?
Yeah. Well, I think that one thing that I go back to a lot is that this is not a 6-week thing, right? And grief is not something where you get to check off 5 boxes. And once you've checked off those 5 boxes, you're done with it, right? And I think that that's true for all of us. And it's especially true for kids. And some of the push to speed grief up, especially in kids, that, you know, after 6 months, kids should be over it, is, I believe, really false. And so I think that plan on being there for the long term, right? To know that a year, even 2 years is a very small amount of time when it comes to grief and loss. And, you know, it takes 2 or 3 years for kids to even kind of, I think, feel assimilated to some normalcy. And so knowing that this is a lifelong journey and process, and there's always going to be times that kids are going to, you know, miss the person who died, want to talk about the person who died, and for really to give kids the opportunity to express themselves in their own time, in their own way, and to be there to receive that expression, right? So I think kids knowing that there's adults around them who aren't afraid to say the person's name, who will share memories or talk to them when the kid is ready, and to follow a child's lead. I think all of that is so important to help kids to understand that they don't have to end their relationship with the person who died. My mom will always be my mom, and she's the only mom I'm ever going to have, right? And so I'm 47 now, and she's still my mom, and it's okay that I think about her, I talk about her, I still have a relationship with her. And I'm sure I would imagine, feel this way about those in your life, right? That you don't want to give up on having a relationship with them. And I think a lot of the world wants us to move on. They want us to forget about it. They want us to be okay. But that's for them, because it makes them uncomfortable if we still have feelings or if we talk about memories.
How do I know when people are ready to talk about it?
Yeah. Well, I think that, so I can tell you an example, which is my husband and I adopted our third child after the death of both of her parents. Our older two are my stepkids and my husband's biological kids. And when Jordan came into our home when she was 10 years old. And I can tell you that over time, her ability to engage and talk about her parents has totally changed. And in the beginning, if we were at a family function, if someone came up to her and talked to her about either one of her parents, it would have made her really uncomfortable. But there were people who would say things like, I'm thinking of you, I'm here for you, if you ever want to talk, I'm around. Or even just, like the people that do show up, right? And say, I remember some of my mom's friends that would just call me and say, hey, you want to go grab an ice cream, or you want to go shopping, or any of those things, and just be there, right? And then I could open up. And over time, I've seen Jordan's ability to open up about it so much more clearly. And my sister came into town over the holidays, and she just stopped for a minute and said, oh, you're reminding me of your mom right now, because Jordan's mom was our first cousin. And she started talking about Jordan's mom, and started sharing memories that I didn't even have, because I was young. I was younger than she was. And it was so neat and so nice for Jordan to hear that. Now, mind you, Jordan's mom died when she was 3. Her dad died when she was 10. So this was it was 14 years ago that her mom died. But just to have that, right, to keep those, keep talking about it, to keep those memories alive. She still is navigating all of it and figuring it out. So is there a magic, like once this happens, then a kid is ready to talk about it? No, but I think following a kid's lead and letting a kid know that you are a safe person, that you are someone who's willing to talk about it, who will be there. And, you can even say to a kid like, hey, I don't know if you want to talk about this right now, but I'm a person you can talk to about your mom. I cherish the cards that I received with memories of my mom. And when people share with me about my mom, their memories, it means so much to me. And I then know that they're a safe person that I can talk to about my mom. And so, with kids and teenagers, it's like, if you're not afraid to bring the person up, then they know that they don't need to be afraid to bring them up in front of you.
I love that idea about sharing your memories as a way to be part of it, don't you, Heidi?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, my mom and I were able to tour the Dougy Center several years ago, and it is so phenomenal. And the thing that I loved about it is that all emotions are okay. Volcano room.
It's called our volcano room. But yes, I mean, kids can express anger, right?
You've got that. You have puppets. You have a tree that memorializes them. I mean, there's so many ways to express anger, and sometimes kids don't want to do it talking, so they want to do it by showing you. And you definitely have given them all those avenues.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, oftentimes play is kids' language, especially little kids, before they have the words to talk about it, right? They can play through it. So we have a music room, we have a theater and dress up room, we have a puppet theater, as you mentioned. We have the big energy areas with the volcano room, which is a padded room with nothing but soft stuff in it, so kids can jump off the walls, literally bounce off the walls and not get hurt. There's a punching bag hanging in near the volcano room, air hockey, foosball, basketball, like big energy to get that out so kids can really express what they're going through. And then also, every kid, every time they come to Dougy Center, gets the chance to tell their story, their name, their age, who died, and how they died. And we do that in our opening circle. And the kids are placed into groups based on age and who died and how they died, so that they can be with, it's about 15 or 16 kids in a group, and they can be with other kids that have similar experiences. Oftentimes, kids want to talk about important, hard things with other kids their same age. And that opportunity is really what the Dougy Center is based on.
Right. And the Dougy Center is in Portland, Oregon.
So our website is dougy.org, dougy.org. And you all mentioned the free resources that we have on our website, literally hundreds of downloadable tip sheets, activities. Our podcast, Grief Out Loud, is accessed all over the world. We have hundreds of resources for folks. We have a bookstore. And then to contact us, our email is help@dougy, dougy.org. And of course, folks can also call us during our business hours as well.
Great. And where do they get your book, a kid's book about grief?
So it's available through the Dougy Center's bookstore. I also know that it's available through the publisher, which is A Kid's Book About. That's the name of the publisher.
Brennan, thank you so much for being on and for all the wonderful work you do and all the great work the Dougy Center does.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely, Brennan. I sing your praises in my class, my grief class at Columbia. I go to your site and I show my students, because you have invaluable resources, and you have, like you said, hundreds of them for anyone that's trying to figure out how to navigate these waters and help children and families after a loss. Yeah. And you are an exemplifier, as my mom and I always say, for someone who has not only survived a very significant death of your mother, but gone on to thrive and to help others. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for joining us on this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.